Thanks. Good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining me today, just under 1 week out of our August 4th primary. And I really just want to share the message with you and with voters across the state of Michigan today, ahead of next week's primary, that we're ready. We're ready to go. And look, it's truly a new day for democracy here in Michigan. This year's elections are taking place with new mandates from voters and amidst a health and economic crisis unlike anything we've experienced before. So for the past 19 months, my administration has worked in partnership with local clerks and national experts to implement the election reforms that voters overwhelmingly approved in the 2018 elections. And since March, we've been continuing this work within the context of the COVID-19 pandemic. So simply put, even adjusting for these unexpected realities, our collective efforts have made it easier to vote and harder to cheat in Michigan. First, beginning immediately upon taking office, I took several steps to directly increase the accuracy of our voter rolls. This included joining ERIC, the Electronic Registration Information Center, a national collaboration of the majority of states in our country and the federal government, to share data so that when voters become ineligible to vote in our state due to a change in address or death, we learn about it and can update our rolls accordingly. Secondly, in 2019, we implemented automatic voter registration in our state. This means that now every time an eligible citizen gets or updates their state ID or driver's license, we either update or confirm their registration or register them to vote unless they opt out. What this means is that every transaction we have, we're proactively increasing the accuracy of our voter file, voter by voter. And finally, this recent statewide mailing to all registered voters that was designed to educate our citizens on how to exercise their right to vote by mail in the midst of this pandemic had a secondary goal of also identifying inaccurate registration information that we inherited so that we could clean that up as well. Because the processes I just told you catch new and emerging challenges and changes, but catching a backlog and updating our list from a backlog of changes needed a mailing like this. Importantly, this was the first statewide mailing to the voter file in 9.5 years. And the data we're receiving will make the accuracy of our voter file better than ever. On the election security front, we've increased our security protocols and technology to protect access to our voter registration list. We've hired the state's first ever full-time election security director. We've added multi-factor authentication to our qualified voter file, adding to its security parameters, conducted the state's first statewide post-election risk-limiting audit pilot. We've boosted the state's participation in the Election Information Sharing Analysis Center, and we upgraded our election software that's used by local clerks and state officials. Alongside all this work, which is making it harder to cheat in our state, we're also making voting more accessible to every citizen. For this, the proof is in the pudding. Close to 2 million voters have requested to vote by mail in next week's primary. That is nearly double the amount of absentee ballots ever processed in any election in our state's history. The previous record was 1.15 million votes cast by mail, and that was in the 2016 general election. So indeed, despite false rhetoric, misinformation, scare tactics that have circulated for months from various different actors and voices, and it will no doubt escalate in the months ahead, Michigan citizens and voters know that voting from home is safe, convenient, and secure, and this is reflected in the enormous embracing of this option they have to vote by mail that has occurred in advance of this August primary. And thankfully, even prior to the pandemic, we had been working with clerks to anticipate and prepare for this dramatic increase of citizens voting by mail. Since last year, we've been working with the United States Postal Service to redesign our ballot envelopes to meet their standards, making it easier and more efficient to move our ballots through the system, and supporting election clerks with funds to buy additional equipment to process and count what we anticipated would be an inevitable increase of absent voter ballots sent to them to be processed centrally. And then after the pandemic hit in March, we redoubled our efforts. As I mentioned, we informed every voter how to exercise their right to vote from home in a statewide mailing, and we invested in infrastructure improvements that helped clerks acquire high-speed ballot counting machines, automatic letter openers, ballot drop boxes, and other equipment. We've also modernized our systems to meet the expectations and mandates of voters. We've launched online voter registration and an online tool to request absent voter ballots through our website. And we've also made both accessible for people with disabilities. And finally, we have ensured that voters choosing to vote in person will have safe in-person voting options as well for this primary and for November. For instance, we've sent all election jurisdictions in our state new guidelines and training materials to ensure polling places are safe and accessible for all voters. To keep election workers and voters safe, we've also provided gloves, disposable masks, cleaning products, hand sanitizer, and face shields, as well as new protocols for hygiene and social distancing. Additionally, as the pandemic has forced many experienced election workers from service this year, we've launched the state's first ever massive statewide recruitment effort of new election workers, where we've been able to recruit more than 5,000 individuals, trained them, and provided them to clerks across the state to fill a dire need right now and in November. At the same time, local and county clerks have taken action in partnership with our office, recruiting additional staff, setting up drop boxes, stepping up public communication efforts, improving the security of their websites, and taking their own steps to improve safety. All of this combines to underscore that this is a truly unprecedented time for our election clerks, for our Bureau of Elections, for my administration, and for our voters. And we've worked tirelessly to adjust, adapt, and ensure voting rights are protected so that democracy can continue on time and on schedule. Because of all this, I want to communicate to you all today that we're ready. All ready, and we expect more in the weeks ahead. Various actors will try to attempt to spread false information about the integrity and security of our systems that are intended to mislead voters about their rights and sow seeds of doubt among the electorate about the accuracy of the results of our elections. We cannot let them carry the day. We need your help to get this information to our voters so that they know the work that we and their clerks are doing at every level, and that we can give them the certainty that whether they vote in person or through the mail, our elections are secure, their vote will be safe, and their ballot will be counted. Finally, I also want to emphasize democracy is a team sport. While we have diligently carried out the will of the voters, alongside our clerks have met every challenge thrown our way this year, our work has been made more challenging with the inaction of our state legislature, which despite numerous calls for action and various pieces of legislation introduced, has passed only one piece of election-related legislation in the last 19 months. As the pandemic shows no sign of abating and the number of citizens seeking to vote by mail is higher than ever before in our state's history, continued inaction by lawmakers when we need their support and partnership now more than ever will equate to a dereliction of duty. Numerous bills have been introduced to support voters and election clerks around the state, many of which are endorsed by the Michigan Association of Municipal Clerks and the Michigan Association of County Clerks. A strong package introduced last week would require all jurisdictions to maintain a permanent list of voters seeking to vote by mail. That would allow ballots postmarked by election day to still be counted if they're received within the following 48 hours, and require clerks to contact voters if their mailed-in ballot envelope signature does not match their signature on file. I support this package and I call on our legislature to act on it swiftly. But most critically, as I've said for more than a year now, alongside our clerks, it is paramount that we have a law that allow our clerks to begin processing ballots cast through the mail prior to election day. This is common practice in 18 states. And in Florida, just recently, which by the way, Florida already allows processing to begin 22 days prior to election day, Governor Ron DeSantis just recently issued an executive order allowing clerks to begin even earlier due to the COVID-19 pandemic. So other states are adapting or adjusting. We need our legislature to do the same, because while Michigan is lagging behind other states in that, this also means in a year where a record number of people will be voting by mail, our clerks can't even open envelopes and arrange ballots for tabulation until the morning of election day, when every single one of them is already going to be dealing with several other different issues. This will create undue pressure and stress for our election officials that is unnecessary, and our officials will have to work through the night, increasing the potential for human error and other challenges in the counting. It also, importantly, creates a lag between when the polls close on election night and when the results are announced that will create a space to enable bad actors to falsely raise questions about the sanctity and security of our elections. That reality has implications not just for our voters, but for the entire country. So on that note, I'll close and take your questions. Thank you again for coming here today to hear about the work we're doing to prepare for next week and for November, and look forward to the conversation.
Thank you, Secretary Benson. So this is a press conference. I know we have guests who are not members of the media, but I would ask that members of the media are those who ask questions. Again, if you're on video, you have the opportunity to hit the raise hand button. For those who have called in on the phone, you're welcome to sort of shout out, and we'll do our best to manage questions as they come in. You will need to unmute yourselves to ask a question. You can do so by pressing *6, or if you're on screen, by hitting the button.
Madam Secretary, are you predicting that you won't have election results on election night and it could be days?
That sounded like Tim. Is that Tim Skubik? No one, I can't see anyone. So you got it.
Yes.
I can recognize voices, but your name would be great to hear too. But I recognize you, Tim. So yes, regarding election night, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you. Go ahead.
You're not going to have results on election night. It's going to be days.
We are anticipating that there will be, and we are asking for patience. It may take some time to count and process all the ballots leading that are processed through the mail, because we're dealing with, in many cases, 2 times the amount of ballots that are typically processed internally. And if we don't increase the time on the back end that clerks have to process them, yes, it will take more time on the post-election and to ensure that they're counting them efficiently and accurately. So we are asking for patience. We are among many other states, alongside many other states right now, working to prepare all of you and the public with to not get the results immediately upon polls closing on election night, because the main difference is, in years where ballots are voted in the precincts, you can immediately get that, as you all know, precinct total, and that is transmitted to our central tabulators to the counties, and that creates the results quite quickly. When ballots are being processed centrally in absentee counting boards, it takes a little bit longer. You don't have that instantaneous counting as every ballot is cast, and it very well may take several more days to get the final total for all the elections. And that's why I want to emphasize accuracy is key here. I think we all want to prioritize accuracy over speed, and that's what we're preparing for. However, we've also tried to increase the capacity of our clerks and election officials to efficiently process ballots as quickly as they can, assuming no changes in the law, beginning at 7 a.m. on election day. And that's how we've provided, through our federal funding, more high-speed ballot tabulators, automatic envelope openers, and other supplies like that, as well as providing more people to help increase the capacity of ballots that can be processed within a short amount of time. But I think all of us would love more time as well, to ensure on the back end we're able to deliver results as effectively, efficiently, and again, as accurately on the front end, to, if nothing else, again, minimize that space between when the polls close and when the results are announced, because that space, again, creates a lot of opportunity for bad actors to sow seeds of doubt about the integrity of the process. The last thing I'll say on this, Tim, and to everyone is, we intend to operate as we did in March and in other elections, where we'll be providing you with information as we have it throughout the day, and as much content and information as possible as we're able to provide. In the event that there are days in which that we are continuing to count the ballots, my office will work to continually proactively provide updates on where we are, so that we're all working with the same set of accurate information, and we can report that to our voters accordingly.
Madam Secretary, Mark Cabot at the Oakland.
Mark?
Secretary, it's Mark Cabot at the Oakland Press. Can you hear me?
Yes.
So just a couple questions. First, although more absentee ballots have been requested and issued compared to 2016, the return rate is around 11% lower compared to this time in 2016. Do you have any concerns about people not returning their absentee ballots, and would you encourage them to use the drop boxes at this point rather than the mail?
Yes, and I appreciate the reporting you've already done on this, and because it is important in these final few days for voters who still have their ballots and haven't yet returned them to know all their options for doing so. Of course, they can use the mail, but at this point, we encourage people to use the drop boxes that are in nearly every jurisdiction in our state. You have to use your local drop box because that is the one in which your local clerk will pick up the ballot on election night and begin the tabulation process. We have posted locations of those drop boxes on our website, michigan.gov/vote, for voters to check. They can circulate the link if you don't have it, the specific link. But in addition to that, we want to emphasize that these we will be implementing more drop boxes in advance of November as well. And we're, in some ways learning through the data we glean in this August primary to identify areas where we may need to put more drop boxes in the future. For example, the city of Detroit will likely have more drop boxes in November. The third way people can return their ballots is, of course, through in person to their clerk's office. And many clerks are also setting up drop off areas. Ferndale is an example where people can simply just drop off outside without having to go into the clerk's office. So in all cases, call your local clerk or visit your local clerk with your ballot. And that also holds true to people who may not have yet received their ballots after requesting them. And we know we're tracking those numbers as well. And we know there are people out there that are still waiting to receive their ballots and vote them who've requested them. And under state law, you can request them in writing up until Friday. So that said, to people who haven't yet received their ballots, we're also encouraging them to go, if they're able to, in person to their clerk and request a ballot right there. When they do that, if a ballot has already been sent to them, and we'll have a note of that, that already sent ballot that may be in transit will be invalidated so that it cannot be counted. And there's a barcode that enables us to track all of this. The new ballot that they get with their clerk will be their valid ballot that they can then count. So there's no concern or possibility of anyone getting two ballots through that type of action. But certainly also we want to ensure that everyone who wants to vote in this primary is able to do so. And we're dealing with many variables, most critically, obviously, the post office, who we're working with extensively to ensure things are moving. But we know, again, lots of variables in the midst of the pandemic and funding issues for the post office. And that require us to adjust, adapt, and that's one of the reasons why we've installed drop boxes around the state to give voters that other option for returning ballots in times like these.
Secretary, really quick, one more question, very briefly. Can Michiganders still sign up to be an election worker? Is it too late to apply to be an election worker?
It is not too late to apply to be an election worker, and you can go to michigan.gov/democracymvp to do so. In many jurisdictions, their deadlines are this week, but of course, we're starting to build for November as well. So if you have an interest, even if it doesn't come to fruition in August, we certainly are going to need you for November, so please sign up. And in jurisdictions that are still working to fill needs, if you sign up now or over the next few days, you may indeed be called upon to serve in August. So please continue to sign up. We've had more than 5,000 people, as I mentioned, sign up through our website, filling an enormous need for our state. And I'm grateful for all those who've stepped up to serve and willing to be a part of democracy in this way.
Hi, this is Walt Sork, the Michigan Polycast. Are you comfortable that in November we will not have a repeat of what we saw in Wisconsin and Georgia with lines that go on forever?
Well, we're doing everything we can to mitigate that possibility, really in three ways. Number one, recognizing that when you have a universe of people voting, and providing them with as many options as possible to vote minimizes the need that they will all choose to vote in person on election day, creating, again, the crowds, potential for crowds in polling places. So by encouraging people to vote early at their clerk's office or vote by mail, and again, the record numbers we're seeing voting by mail really underscores our success in this area, that simply moves people out of the precincts at their choice, at their own volition, and enables them to vote by mail and ensure their vote is counted. And again, the earlier people start planning to vote by mail, the smoother the process is going to be for those individual voters. What that does, let's say we have 100 voters in a particular area. If you get, let's say, 60% of those voters, which is the number we're tracking, 60 people voting by mail, that's 60 less people that will be showing up in person on election day. That leaves 40. Now let's say we take 20 of them and they vote early in their clerk's office, where they go in prior to election day and get their ballot and return it right there, or in a satellite office that many clerks are setting up throughout the state for these purposes. That removes another 20 from the pool that will be voting on election day. That ensures the remaining 20%, let's say, or 20 people that in this hypothetical would show up to vote in person are significantly less than the 100 who want to vote in that precinct. And therefore there's inherent less possibility for crowding. But of those 20, then we're ensuring that they don't lose access to their precinct, which is sort of the second thing that's happened in other states where precincts have closed, by working with the local clerks to ensure to track where precincts may be closing because physical facilities may not be available, and provide alternatives. The Pistons using their training facility and other venues opening up for the first time are an example of that, and you'll see more of that leading up to November. So ensuring we don't lose that physical location, that those physical locations for in-person voting, once we reduce the potential for crowding, have enough space for social distancing. That's step 2. And then step 3 is making sure that we can staff our precincts. Because when you look at a Wisconsin or Georgia, it wasn't just the lack of a truly robust vote by mail option that led to crowding in those areas. It wasn't just the closure of physical spaces for precincts that led to crowding. It was also the fact they didn't have enough poll workers. So they couldn't open up a large number of precincts, and they had to consolidate as a result. We're mitigating that potential challenge by recruiting these 5,000 and more individuals so that on election day, we don't have to close precincts because we can't staff them. And that enables us to keep precincts open, to minimize crowding for the voters who still choose to vote in person, and ensure that no matter what choice a voter takes in voting on election day, they can do so safely and securely.
Secretary, it's John Ward at Yahoo News. Can you run us through the details of what you're asking for? As I understand it, you're asking to be able to check signatures, but not necessarily to count votes. I'm also curious how far in advance you'd like to be able to start doing that, and whether there is any legislation, whether it's the package you mentioned or another one, that includes that proposal, and whether you have any indication from the legislature that they intend to move on this. I'm sorry, that's a lot, I know.
Yeah, so let me start with the 4 pieces of legislation we'd like to see happen really in order of priority prior to Election Day. The first is enabling more processing time for our clerks. The second is enabling ballots that are mailed in and postmarked by Election Day to be counted if they're received within a few days of Election Day. The third is legislation requiring clerks to contact the voter to give them an opportunity to fix their signature if indeed the signature on their ballot envelope doesn't match the signature we have on file. That requirement not only ensures that we don't wrongly reject a valid ballot, but it also is an additional security check so that we're looking into, or we're requiring clerks to look into and examine a mismatch in signatures. And finally, we want to see the electronic return of ballots for military and overseas voters, including military spouses and their dependents, to enable them to efficiently, especially at a moment where there's so much challenges with international mail, efficiently return their ballots electronically as they can do in many other states. Legislation has been introduced on those 4 areas, and it's in various stages of the process. Some has been passed through the House, some is waiting for a hearing. Some, like the military voting, needs some significant amendments to make it a real solution. But the legislation has been introduced to get to your specific question on the processing. I think right now our clerks can check signatures, but they cannot even open envelopes or arrange ballots for tabulation until the morning of Election Day. So that's unlike 18 other states where you can basically do everything to prepare, and then on Election Day all you have to do is send them through the high-speed tabulators that we have provided, and that is our best shot of ensuring that we have accurate results, that we're not unduly burdening our clerks and election workers having to work several more hours than they otherwise would have to through the night in order to get these results through efficiently. And again, is a best practice in place in many other states, and underscored by the fact that just recently Florida even said, you know what, we even need more time to do this. So that said, I think I stand with the clerk's request and also the existing legislation, which even giving people an extra day, enabling them to start on Monday as opposed to Tuesday morning to begin preparing the ballots for tabulation, is going to be an added boost and significant help when we're asking clerks to process and deal with 2, if not in November, 3 times as many ballots than they've ever had to deal with before, processing and counting them and tabulating them centrally.
This is Kathy Gray at the New York Times. I'm wondering if you have any numbers from the presidential primary in March of ballots that couldn't be counted because they got there after, they were postmarked but didn't get there until after Election Day?
Jay can get you those specific numbers, but I would say, broadly speaking, because we have looked at them, because I've also looked at just the entire universe of ballots that weren't counted, noting that March is a little bit different than August and November, but it still could be an indicator. We've also been tracking other states as well, who, as you know, in Kentucky, New York, and many other states, we've seen rejections of ballots that have arrived after Election Day because of the laws there. All I have to say is we can get you the specific numbers, but I want to emphasize when we talk about ballots being rejected, the data shows, not just in Michigan, but in every state, it's really because of one of three things. One, the ballot is postmarked by Election Day, but it arrives after. This is the largest number, and this is why legislation to fix that would be so significant. Two, it's because someone doesn't sign the outside of the envelope at all. That is sort of the second most frequent reason a ballot would not be counted or would be rejected. It's why that legislation requiring clerks to reach out to a voter in that scenario to give them a chance to fix it is also really important. And third, the ballot would be rejected because the signature didn't match, which oftentimes the data shows is because a voter's signature has changed, or they sign it quickly and not carefully, like we sign a credit card slip, for example, as opposed to more carefully and legibly as they may have signed earlier. So again, that mismatch will be caught. The vote would not be counted, even though it's a valid vote. And in that case, requiring clerks to follow up with people to enable them to fix it would be critical. The last thing I'll say on that is what we've also done is redesign those ballot envelopes that I mentioned earlier. And we've been able to track, and again, Jay can get you the specific percentages, but we looked at this issue immediately in 2019, just because we knew these three issues were reasons for ballot rejection. And we redesigned our ballots to already start decreasing the number of times a signature was not given, or absent, or a mismatch based on simply the redesign of the ballot envelope. So again, we can get you those specific percentages and the specific rejection rates, but that's a kind of more information about why we're doing what we're doing and what we're trying to do to head off some of those challenges.
Secretary Benson, this is Beth LeBlanc with the Detroit News. Quick question, just to clarify what you said earlier, do you expect a delay of several days for the August primary or just for the November general election? And then also, with the increase in absentee ballots for Tuesday's primary, do you expect a lot of the ballots to be tossed for like mistaken crossover ballots?
Yes, thank you for those questions. I think for the time that we're anticipating, we're basing it on estimates, and it's just in some ways basic math of how long, based on how long it takes for one absentee ballot counting board to process a specific number of ballots, and then extrapolating that out to anticipate with twice as many ballots how much longer that would take. So all that to say is, in March, we had 1 million ballots, around 1 million ballots sent through the mail. You may remember in March, we were able to deliver the results, even though we anticipated taking more time. We were able to deliver those results for the election, for the most part, close to or at right after when the polls closed. And I visited absentee counting boards that day in March. Sorry about that, my battery's dying. I visited absentee counting ballot boards that day and basically saw they're already at capacity. They already know how to process statewide 1 million and do so on time. They've got the procedures, the people, the planning, the machines in place for that. So that's why you saw results mostly on time for March. Now in August, we're talking about twice as many ballots. And the only changes that have happened in the infrastructure since March and August to anticipate and deal with this twice as many ballots, with twice as many ballots coming in, are we've given people more machines. Which is all we've really had the ability and authority to do, and make sure they're not short-staffed by helping them to provide with more people to operate those machines. We haven't been able to give them more time. So that's why when you're dealing with basically the same infrastructure with some more machines and envelope openers and all the rest, it's going to take more time unless something changes with the law in the next few days. And we all data would suggest that we're talking about at least 1 or 2 days before we get the results in most races in our August primary. Now, let's look at November. Assuming nothing has changed in terms of the time that people have, the clerks have to process these ballots. Now let's assume 3 times as many. Let's assume that 3 million people are voting by mail in November, which again, we're on track to, that's what the data is telling us, that's what we're on track to probably get to. Now we have 3 times as many ballots in the same space with just a few more machines and no more time. So that's why basic math will tell us it's just simply going to take more time on the other side of Election Day to get through all those ballots. And the only thing at this point that can help mitigate that and get our results in sooner is the passage of legislation to enable people to start processing these ballots sooner. And so long-winded answer to your question, but that's how we're using data to help inform our predictions and why we haven't seen a scenario yet this far in my administration or past administrations where we've been significantly delayed in getting results. You have seen that, of course, in other states, but we anticipate you will see that in August for the reasons I just articulated. And we anticipate, again, barring legislative changes, it's going to be even worse in November. And that's why we're doing everything we can to get more machines and more people to increase capacity, but we also need to just manage expectations and let you all know what we're seeing so that we can be prepared accordingly on Election Day and the day after and the day after to wait and be patient as the results are tabulated.
Thanks, Secretary Benson, and thank you all for joining. I need to get Secretary Benson off to her next meeting, so I appreciate everyone jumping in. You all have my contact information. If there were questions that you couldn't get answered today, Tracy or I would be happy to assist. Have a good day.
Bye, guys.